It was a cold, overcast morning in January 2010 when Nadia stood in the doorway of her father's bedroom. The house felt different now, emptier, quieter. She could hear the creaking of old wooden floorboards beneath her feet, the same ones that had echoed for years as she grew up. But today they seemed unfamiliar. The house, once filled with the comforting hum of her father's presence, now felt haunted by his absence. Her father, Raymond, had passed away just a few weeks ago, and Nadia had come to settle his affairs. The task before her seemed impossible. Sorting through decades of memories, relics of his life, was overwhelming. His things, his books, his papers, his clothes, felt like fragments of a life she never truly understood. They were pieces of a puzzle that she had never seen in full. Nadia moved slowly into the room, her eyes lingering on the old leather chair by the window where her father used to sit and stare out at the trees. She could almost see him there still, as though the room were holding on to him. But the chair was empty now, and the walls around her seemed to close in. She began with the dresser. The top drawer was filled with old ties, a few pairs of shoes, and a set of cufflinks she remembered from her childhood. As she rifled through the drawer, something caught her eye. Beneath a faded silk scarf, she found a small, leather-bound journal. It was worn, its edges frayed, and the cover had a slight indentation, as though it had been held tightly for years. Nadia hesitated. The journal had never been mentioned. Her father never spoke of it. It was strange to think of him keeping secrets, but there was something in the back of her mind telling her she should leave it alone. Still, curiosity gnawed at her, and with a sigh, she opened the cover. The first page was dated June 1st, 1960. The handwriting was unmistakable, her father's. But as she read the first lines, her heart began to race. She could feel the weight of the words sinking into her chest. June 1st, 1960. We went to the Santiam forest again today. Mike, Tom, and I, just like when we were kids, hiking through the trees, laughing, pretending to be adventurers. But there's something about this place, something we couldn't explain back then, and something we can't explain now. It was supposed to be a quiet trip, just the three of us, no one else for miles around. The sun had just started to dip behind the trees, casting long, sharp shadows across the forest floor. That's when we saw it. At first we thought it was a woman, but no one in their right mind would mistake this thing for a person. Her skin was deathly pale, like the color of bone, stretched too tight over her skeletal frame. Her hair, if it could even be called hair, hung in long, tangled strands of black, greasy strands that seemed to sway in the wind. And her eyes. I don't know if eyes can be empty, but these were. Hollow, deep pits of nothingness. I don't know what we were thinking. Maybe it was the excitement of the adventure. Maybe it was something else. But we approached her, and that was our mistake. Mike was the first to scream. I could hear the crack of branches under his feet as he bolted in the opposite direction. But Tom was still frozen. And then, like something out of a nightmare, the woman, or whatever she was, lunged. Her face was a mass of sharp teeth and blackened gums, her mouth stretching impossibly wide. She sank her teeth into Tom's shoulder and, God help me, I could hear the wet tearing of flesh. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream. I was paralyzed, as if my body had suddenly turned to stone. I could see Mike in the distance, still running, still screaming. But I couldn't do anything. I couldn't save him. I couldn't save Tom. That's when I heard a voice that came from the darkness itself. Stay calm. Don't look away. A figure stepped out from the trees. He was tall, imposing, with a strange, almost unnatural presence. His clothes were dark, but not modern. There was something otherworldly about him. The creature stopped. It didn't make a sound as it slowly turned its head toward the man. For a moment the world seemed to freeze, and I thought we might all die there, in that awful silence. But the man didn't hesitate. He raised a long, jagged knife, and in one swift movement, he struck. The creature howled in pain as it recoiled, its sharp teeth gnashing. But it wasn't enough. With a single swipe, the man drove the blade into the creature's chest, and it collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. Blood splattered the forest floor, but the creature didn't move. It was dead. I was still frozen. The man walked over to me, his eyes never leaving mine. "You're safe now, but you should never come back here. Never." I didn't understand. What was happening? Who was this man? What was that thing? And why was he telling me never to return to this place? Before I could ask a single question, he vanished into the trees, as if he had never been there at all. I don't know what happened to Tom. I never saw him again. And Mike, well, I never saw him after that night either. We left the forest together, but a part of me knows we left something behind. Something we shouldn't have. And now I understand. Now I know. Nadia closed the journal, her hands trembling. She felt sick to her stomach. What had her father gone through? What had he witnessed in that forest so long ago? The answers were there, hidden between the lines. But what would they mean for her now? As she sat there, the house silent around her, Nadia couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. Something she couldn't see, but could feel, like a shadow just out of sight. She closed the journal, stood up, and placed it gently back in the drawer, locking it away. But deep down, she knew the truth. Her father's story wasn't over, and hers had just begun. The night fell over the house, and as Nadia lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were growing closer. The story of the Santiam forest had only begun to unravel, and there was more to it than she was ready to understand.